All right, just as planned and scheduled, 6:15 a.m. Central on a Sunday. Who's got two thumbs and will defend the Browns? This guy. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier. Look, there's two teams in the NFL that really demonstrate and illustrate the importance of the quarterback in modern NFL football. And it's not the Chiefs, it's not the Eagles, it's the Colts and the Browns. Because both those teams have, I think, very smart and capable GMs who have at times put together very impressive rosters, and yet because they can't seem to find the right quarterback, and then they take huge swings and misses in their desperation to find a quarterback, they just can't get over the hump. And the Browns, I will give them credit for this. They keep taking swings at the plate, and they did it in a cost-effective method this time around, but they also loaded up on draft picks for next year in case, especially if the Jaguars end up having a disappointing season, they've got another swing at the plate. So I'm going to try to separate all the hoopla and all the controversy from the Shedeur and try to talk about it as measured as possible, because that's obviously the big story coming out of this Browns draft. But it's worth mentioning that the Browns, on the sum total of it all, they ended up having a really good draft as far as, as garbage as post-draft grades are. Browns get an A+. Partly it's because people had a first or second round grade on Shedeur Sanders, so you end up getting him. That ends up looking like great value. They loaded up on future picks. I thought they did a good job with the selections that they did have. But we need to hear what the anonymous executives from around the league are saying. The Athletic, Mike Sando, he's a trustworthy guy. When he gives the anonymous quotes, I believe that these are actually anonymous quotes and not fabricated. Let's just dive right into what anonymous executives are saying about the Browns. All right, you like some of the pieces, but there's the glue that has never been there. Most teams had Sanders rated as a second-round pick, but when you're building a team, you have to include the intangibles and the other stuff and decide whether you want it or not. For most teams at that stage, it was not worth it, so he falls a couple rounds, and it's too hard for a team like the Browns to pass on him. I think that probably sums it all up and gives the most succinct and likely explanation for everything that happened with Shedeur Sanders. A lot of teams had a second-round grade on him. Think back to Will Levis when people like Daniel Jeremiah thought Will Levis might go in the top 5 or would go in the top 5. Realistically, and it's been borne out this way, Will Levis was a second-round guy. Now, when you get to the second round and nobody's selecting Shedeur Sanders, and the teams that really, really had quarterback needs perhaps had already addressed it, that's where the hoopla comes in. And whether it's fair or not, the perception of the circus or a perceived entitlement, whatever it might be, at that point, what Sean Pendergast and I had talked about was, man, this might be the spot where Shedeur is going to keep sliding until there's a team that feels they get to a point in the draft where there's expendable picks or relatively expendable picks, like the 5th or 6th or 7th round. That's where he might end up going. And lo and behold, that's what they did. And the Browns took a swing on what they thought was value. The interesting thing is that it's a very, very crowded quarterback room. My absolute favorite GIF or video I saw surrounding any of this is one that I think even Browns fans can appreciate. It was from the Family Guy.
No, not you, Seamus.
Ah, poo.
It's a crowded quarterback room. Having a quarterback competition these days gets a lot dicier because the CBA allows for so few snaps to be taken during training camp. You go back to the days when the Packers would just be loaded up with quarterbacks all over the place. They got Hasselbeck on the practice squad. They got Mark Brunell in the building and Brett Favre and all those guys out there at once. And there aren't as many reps to go around. You don't have genuine two-a-days anymore. The OTAs are very limited and very tightly structured. So at some point, they're going to have to make a decision on all of that. Let's look at the next quote. There was also the matter of the Browns coach, GM, and personnel appearing less than jubilant when cameras captured Cleveland making the Sanders selection. That added to the perception that ownership drove a selection that wouldn't make sense to team builders. I'm going to show a couple clips that both show that clip and then also Stefanski responding with an explanation there. So this anonymous exec says, what the team builders are saying is there's a level of distraction that comes with some players that impacts the team. The energy that goes into coaching certain players impacts the team. And at the quarterback position, that's huge. Just to put a bow on all of this because I've been all wrapped up in Texans world. For the Browns fans who are brought here via the algorithm, I played for the Texans. I currently cover and am a fan of the Texans. So I am inextricably tied to the Cleveland Browns via Deshaun Watson and have kind of there's no schadenfreude involved whatsoever. Now I want to see how they're going to dig themselves up out of the Deshaun Watson stuff. So here's the reaction for those of you who didn't see it, or at least part of it. Stefanski was originally clapping, kind of a golf clap at the beginning, and then Andrew Berry just looked kind of dead in the eyes. There was a lot of speculation that, oh boy, Jim Haslam did it again. He put us right back out there. Here's Stefanski and Berry responding to that.
We saw your guys' reaction in the war room. It just didn't look necessarily exuberant. So I don't know what we were seeing, but maybe you can explain that. And then also, like, how did this happen?
Yeah, I think we're probably just tired from the weekend.
Those clips, it's not timed up to exactly the right
When
time,
we're actually
so I
making
wouldn't,
the
don't read too much into that.
Yeah, and remember, they kind of dragged that out because when they made the pick, then you got to the point where on the broadcast they were clearly getting ready to be like, oh, okay, this is the Cleveland pick, and it's the Shedeur Sanders pick. We're gonna get everybody up out there. So by the time the pick was announced on television, it's not like that was the time they made the call or made the decision. I totally stand by the Browns in that regard. Andrew Berry at one point in this press conference said that, look, the owner lets us do what we're gonna do. I think that Jim Haslam, whether you want to take him at his word in anything or at all, he's said that he's learned from the error of his ways. He's going to let his football people make the football decisions. And there was, I mean, if you hadn't already drafted Dillon Gabriel, it makes a lot of, if the Browns hadn't drafted Dillon Gabriel already, then it makes perfect sense. Okay, they're the team that's going to jump in there, and it's a 5th round pick. If all of the negatives about Shedeur are true, then so be it. We messed up with a 5th round pick. If it's an overstatement, or if Shedeur kind of just puts his nose to the grindstone and he ends up working out and playing a guy that was a fringe 1st round, 2nd round pick, then so be it. That's found money really in a lot of ways. 3rd pick, 3rd anonymous quote. The Athletic starts off saying, whatever the case, Cleveland emerged from this draft with Jacksonville's 2026 first-round pick after trading down 3 spots to number 5 to select Mason Graham at the expense of Travis Hunter. Execs loved adding that pick. The Browns also selected a league-high 3 players among the top 36 selections and landed Sanders far later than anticipated. They got a lot of talented players, the executive said. Yeah, and that's true. That's not earth-shattering or anything. When you look at the Browns draft, Mason Graham, I'm very intrigued by Mason Graham. His life as a rookie is made easier by having other very good pass rushers around him, specifically, Myles Garrett, one of the best pass rushers in the league. But I'm very fascinated with him because I love the way Mason Graham plays. Love it. Absolutely love it. It's just that sometimes he's so refined technically and uses his hands so well and just has such a good feel for when to snatch his blocker, when to come back against the grain, all those things. He doesn't have the athletic profile of some of the other top tier defensive linemen, and that's where I'm fascinated with him. I think he's going to be a really good NFL player no matter what. Is he worth the top 5 pick? We'll see. He's in the right situation. Schlesinger, the linebacker, I think that was a great pick. It's an off-ball linebacker who's maybe a little bit undersized. Not that he doesn't have awesome pursuit speed, but he's extremely explosive. He's got a 40-inch vertical. So and then you can tell he's got a high football IQ by the way he plays. He's got good instincts. So I really liked him. And then you add Judkins into the mix at running back, and I like their draft a lot. If we look at the actual value of getting a guy that's a perceived 1st or 2nd round quarterback in the 5th round, here is Andrew Berry talking about that.
The biggest thing for us, we live by our board. We felt like he was a good, solid prospect at the most important position. We felt like it got to a point where he was probably mispriced, relative to the draft. really the acquisition cost was pretty light, and it's a guy that we think, can outproduce his draft slot. So I wouldn't say it's any more than that. Mary Kay, I think, obviously Shedeur has kind of grown up in the spotlight, but, our expectation is for him to come in here and work and compete. Nothing's been promised. Nothing will be given. So, I may, hesitate to characterize it as a blockbuster. That's not necessarily how we thought of the transaction, but we are excited to work with him.
I think it's good value. I think that the one that came to mind, and I'm blanking on his name right now, the baseball player quarterback that the Texans drafted in the sixth round in 2006, and then turned around and traded him is Drew Pearson traded him to the Cowboys. I don't think the Browns have any anticipation of trading either of their quarterbacks immediately, but and especially Dylan Gabriel, he was if anything drafted above where at least people anticipated him going. So the Sanders pick at some point, it's a value pick. It's at quarterback. It's the most valuable position in all of sports. Fourth anonymous quote: maybe the Giants came to the conclusion, like the rest of us, that Sanders is a second-round pick. I bristle at everyone saying they are smearing his name. Everyone is caught up to the evaluation that he is not a first-round prospect. The media guys are lagging behind the evaluations, so there has to be a reason. And again, we've addressed this already. All right, if teams were looking at him as a second-round pick, there were two factors there. One is that there was a whole lot of just, media-driven insistence that he was a first-round pick. There were a lot of people saying that they looked at him as a second-round pick before the draft and that he wouldn't go in the first round or might not go in the first round. Those people were shouted down as clickbaiters and hot take artists. So it's not like there was nobody saying it. The other dynamic is that, quarterback teams reach for quarterbacks. So a lot of guys that have, on paper, second-round grades, teams that are desperate for quarterbacks are going to go for Shedeur Sanders, and that's how it didn't work out this way, but then there were other things that drove him falling as far as he did. The one thing that annoys me to no end, and I actually saw a Cleveland guy tweet out the other day that, the Browns just drafted the most accurate quarterback in NFL history. I hate doing this because I feel like I end up smearing the names of some really quality college quarterbacks. But if we look at the all-time passing accuracy leaders, Shedeur Sanders, top of the list. Immediately after him, Colt Brennan, Colt McCoy, Kellen Moore, Graham Harrell, Grayson McCall, Will Rogers, Brandon Weeden, Case Keenum. Three of these guys already have played for the Browns. Chase Holbrook, Seth. You get down to Joe Burrow before you find somebody. Can we please stop using college quarterback stats and guys at the top of the list as as some kind of evidence that they're going to be the best ever? Timmy Chang, bring this back up again. Does this mean that all of a sudden Colt Brennan stops being the most accurate quarterback in NFL history? No. And you know what? Colt Brennan passed away, so I apologize for even bringing his name up. Colt McCoy, Kellen Moore. That is a list of the best system quarterbacks in college football history. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden that accuracy transfers to the NFL. And when you use college quarterback stats and try to ignore scheme, ignore circumstance, it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't mean that Shedeur can't be an accurate quarterback in the NFL. I do think that he had very, very good accuracy. If you actually look at some of the more advanced stats and his target accuracy and all of that, he was in the 90 whatever percentile. He was very, very accurate. It's just hard sometimes when you run a scheme that makes it easier on the quarterback. It's not the quarterback's fault. It just makes it harder to necessarily identify. Plus, with Shedeur, some of those accuracy stats are skewed by the fact that he took way more sacks than he should have. And I'm not grading him down too harshly for that because he had a bad offensive line that forced him into bad decisions. But when you take a sack, you're also not throwing an incomplete pass or an inaccurate pass. Yeah, I am very much. I'm in Shedeur Sanders' corner in terms of he is now an underdog, and I like an underdog. I like an underdog, come from behind story. Last quote from an anonymous scout: Kyler took years to get, or anonymous executive. Kyler took years to get where he's at today. Baker took time to get there. if Shedeur were the second pick, does he ever get there? In the 5th round, maybe he will be humbled and listened because he works and is a good student and all that. He just comes off as entitled and as having a higher opinion of himself than he should. And separating all of the smoke and the anonymous quotes or what have you, there's so much out there about the way he handled himself in meetings with the Giants or with other teams. At one point, Deion Sanders was actively trying to stiff-arm teams that he didn't want Shedeur to go to. He operated in such a way like he was a top 3 slam dunk guaranteed pick. And even then, I would say that most of the guys that have tried to kind of engineer where they're going did it in a different manner and with a little bit more certainty about where they might end up. Eli obviously is the huge one. It's just Eli was just a better prospect in terms of how teams thought about Eli Manning at that point. You can disagree with that. That's just the fact. You can disagree whether he should have been or not. That was the fact of the matter. When you talk about, hey, maybe this is the best thing for him being a 5th rounder and really genuinely have to earn it. Shedeur, and this isn't his fault, but Shedeur's career has been one where there was no competition whatsoever, and realistically so. He got to Jackson State, and he was going to be the best quarterback. He got to Colorado, he was going to be the best quarterback. But you add into that it was his father coaching him, and he never genuinely had that true pressure because he was the chosen one. I think about Jalen Green with the Rockets. I think Jalen Green with the Rockets is one of those guys that in some ways it might have been better for him if he'd been a late 1st round pick or just didn't go as high as he did, because he's, from the get-go, the expectations are that he's going to be a superstar, to the point when you're trying to do everything all at once, it can delay your development, as opposed to just like, all right, let's get good at this, let's get good at this. And you can never know. You can't go back in time and figure out exactly what it's going to be how it would have gone. Anybody who's observing Shedeur since Jackson State have no clue how he really is. Deion Jr. records everything that the family does and has for decades. His nickname is Grown for a reason. Yeah, and I'm open to that contextual precision. That's hard at 6:32 in the morning to say. Yeah, and I'm wide open to it. The other part of it too is whether teams in the NFL were being too critical of the public side of things or the perceived entitlement or whatever. We don't really know. I think, yes, and multiple things can be true. There might be some teams, like Brian Daboll reportedly had a very contentious meeting with Deion Sanders, and that Deion wasn't prepared for the meeting that Brian Daboll thought, the way that Brian Daboll thought he should. But yeah, a lot of this, when it comes from anonymous people and what have you, you just flat out don't know. There's just so many reports of that we don't know what it's like. But then you add on top of that, how many guys in the NFL just look at it and say, man, all of the social media stuff, all of the bold statements and grandiose proclamations or whatever, they just might flat out overly weight that in a way that other guys don't, and we'll find out. So thank you for joining me this early in the morning. Thank you for putting up with my earlier technical difficulties. Please, before you go, like, subscribe. If you're a Texans fan who's on here, consider joining the membership. I do more live streams and long-form Texans live streams on there for some of the more fringe, non-headline topics. Appreciate it, everybody, and everybody have a great weekend.